Okay, so we're making bread that is gluten-free, dairy-free, yeast-free and soya-free. I'm using my Breville baker's oven that has a yeast-free option in it. So in the pan of my bread machine, I've got 3 eggs, and I put 1/4 cup of psyllium husks for fibre, dash of rice wine vinegar, and about a tablespoon of chia seeds for a bit of extra essential fatty acids, and a tablespoon of sugar. Now, in another bowl, I have sifted together several different flours. Basic revolting gluten-free bread is usually made mostly of rice flour and potato flour. So to add a bit of sort of nuttiness and taste, you need to use some more exotic flours. So sifted together, I have 3/4 cup of white rice flour, 3/4 cup of potato flour, 3/4 cup of sorghum flour. Sorghum flour is a bit tricky to find, being quite expensive, but you can find it from Indian delicatessens quite cheaply. Also, instead of sorghum, you can use besan flour, which is chickpea flour, or urid flour, which is lentil flour. Again, besan's pretty well available, widely available, but urid flour or lentil flour you can get from the Indian delicatessen also. Also, I've got 1/4 cup of tapioca flour, 1/4 cup of millet flour. You can use quinoa flour here, spelt quinoa if you don't know. A teaspoon of salt, 8 teaspoons of baking powder, 1½ teaspoons of gluten substitute, which you buy in a packet at the supermarket, and 1½ teaspoon of xanthan gum. Now, these flours have to be pretty well mixed together, or else the baking powder will create huge holes in your bread. So, when that's all mixed together, add that to your pan. Then you need 3 tablespoons of some sort of dairy-free margarine. I use Nuttelex, I find it cooks up better. Then you need to add your fluid, and here I'm using rice milk. You could use soya milk if you're alright with soya. Obviously this gives you added calcium as well in your bread. So the trick here is you need somewhere between 425 and 450 ml, depending on the weather. Now you might laugh at that, but if it's a humid day you need less fluid. If you have too much fluid, your bread will come out, it won't rise properly, and it will look like you've got bits in there that are undercooked. Yep. So today being a relatively mild day, I'm using 425 mils. So pop all that in your mixer, select yeast-free option and start. Now, find with this mix you do need to help it along with a bit of wooden spoon mixing, otherwise the machine can't cope. Now, just to show you, it needs to be relatively thick, a little bit thicker than that because it hasn't mixed in properly, but a relatively thick muffin batter consistency. My machine on the yeast-free section bakes for an hour and 15 minutes. I also find that's not enough, so I bake for an extra 35 minutes on the bake-only option on my machine. So that's about an hour and 50 minutes in total. Now, when it comes out, it's not some great big loaf like you see with a gluten loaf. It's a little bit sunken, so don't panic. You can use it fresh that day, or else what I do is I sit it in my microwave overnight, and then it slices up easier the next morning. And then I often put it in the freezer and use it as toast. And that's gluten-free bread.